All right, everybody, welcome in. It is the first time here in 2025 that I get to say it's Saturday night with TJ and Jason Powers talking college basketball on the College Basketball Coast to Coast platforms. We love the college hoops. Saturday seems to always be a phenomenal day to see what happens across the board in all the conferences, from the SEC, which seems to be so dominant, to the Big Ten, to the ACC, to the Big East, to the Big 12, all the teams out west, the mid-majors, etc. Great to be with you on all the platforms for college basketball coast to coast. Hello, Jason Powers. You're always my wingman. We're both based here in the Tampa Bay area. There's been a ton going on. How you feeling, my friend, with a lot of craziness? There's even some NFL craziness still wrapping up while we're talking college hoops, but we weren't going to be denied on this Saturday night. How are you?
I'm doing well, A lot of upsets this week, and we got a big upset brewing in Motown right about now, right?
Yeah. Washington Commanders in the NFL are looking good. We'll update you on that. Again, thank you for checking us out. If you're finding us on YouTube, for example, on the College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube page, the show is also streaming. I say this stuff because I believe it's happening while we're doing it live. Even if it's not, you'll be able to see it archived. The CBB Coast to Coast Twitter handle is also there, as well as in podcast form after the fact. Find us at College Basketball Coast to Coast, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, etc. So all good stuff here on the program, and love it here as we rock along here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. So I think Jason Powers is back with me here on the program.
Sorry about that. That was my fault.
So right off the bat on the live show, you're already out and back in. All right, so we've got some guests joining us. Matt Zemek, a great college basketball voice, a national voice for many years. He's been with us on College Basketball Coast to Coast, but Matt not only writes for the USC Trojans website, Trojans Wire, on the USA Today family of websites, but Matt has been a national college basketball writer for the better part of about 20 years, a great resource and historian of the sport. He'll be with us in a few minutes. Matt is based in the West. He actually told me, Jason Powers, he's in the Pacific Northwest right now, where as we speak live, it looks like the Gonzaga Bulldogs are going to go down to defeat again in the West Coast Conference after losing on Thursday night to Oregon State. Jason, they're gonna lose to Santa Clara, or Santa Clara is going to beat them, whichever you prefer. Santa Clara up 93-85 in the final 3 minutes. And this is eye-opening stuff that Gonzaga appears to be mortal. So he's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about, kind of with a Western theme. We always have him with the Western theme. How about the Big Ten teams doing well against the Pac? Well, against the former Pac-12 schools that are now in the Big Ten, like Purdue beating Oregon at Oregon. How about Wisconsin beating USC at USC today? That was
Mick
interesting.
Cronin comments. Mick Cronin last week, all the comments he had.
Yeah, he's been blasting his own team, although they responded and beat Iowa last night at home, although Iowa's defense is horrific. But Matt will talk some Western basketball here with us, including the Mountain West, what's now the new Big Ten with USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon out there, the West Coast Conference, etc. And then later on in the program, Adam Zagoria will be here from NJ.com, as well as the zagsblog.com. He has great insight in the Northeast and the Big East. Adam has been at the St. John's rout of Seton Hall tonight, a 30-point blowout. A Big East Saturday that has seen UConn beaten by Creighton, by the way, Jason Powers, that has seen Xavier go into Milwaukee and beat Marquette. It's kind of a topsy-turvy Saturday in the Big East, just real quick. A thought from you on some of the upsets we've seen.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to ask Adam, how is you would figure St. John's is now, I think, 16-3. How are they not ranked? I mean, I know they're
wow.
I mean, I know the SEC has a lot of teams, but boy, 16-3 in the Big East, that's pretty good. They're leading the Big East. Obviously, you mentioned Creighton. Creighton seems to have, not that they have Connecticut's number, but they play them close all the time. They beat
you
them.
can make the argument that they do. I believe I saw that's their 8th win over UConn in the last 10 meetings.
Yeah, I mean,
UConn's won the last national title the last 2 years, the last 2 championships, and Creighton has now beaten them 80% of the time they played them in the last 10 meetings. How about that for that stat?
I mean, McDermott's a great coach at Creighton and just keeps winning games, and he's always going to be a dangerous coach. And boy, he's a good coach there in Creighton.
We love all of this. Again, we lean towards the South and the SEC. Alabama goes into Rupp Arena and wins, but we've also seen upsets. We've seen Vanderbilt knock off Tennessee. We also saw Mississippi State in the basketball version of the Egg Bowl defeat Ole Miss tonight. Auburn survived at Georgia in a narrow win earlier today. Florida walloped Texas. Any overall thought on the Southeastern Conference to kind of blend into our conversation before we start talking to the guests?
I looked at the standings after Tennessee lost. Tennessee's the 6th rated team in the country, and they're in 10th place in the SEC.
It tells you how deep that conference is. What a performance by Vanderbilt as well, especially defensively, unranked. They have now, by the way, beaten Tennessee 6 times, 6 in their history with Tennessee ranked in the top 25. They've beaten them 3 times with Tennessee ranked in the top 10, including today.
And Alabama, great win at Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky ain't afraid to play first team to 100 against some of these SEC teams, but Alabama, that's their style of play. They want to play that kind of game too, and give Bama credit.
Off of a game against Ole Miss where they scored 64 points. I think they had 64 points with about 15 minutes to go in the game at Rupp Arena as they end up winning today. And again, that conference is easily going to have 10 teams out of the 16 get in. They may have an 11th team. Might they have more? Stay tuned about the SEC. By the way, Duke has won tonight, beating Boston College. A little bit of a shaky start at the beginning of the game. Cooper Flagg missed some shots. BC kind of in the game, but Flagg finished with 28. They rolled. He had over 75 friends and family because he's from the state of Maine. This is the closest regionally that Duke's going to play, at least in the regular season or the ACC season, playing in Boston. But I mean, just say something about him. He looks like the real deal as well, and then we'll start rocking along with the guests.
Is that coming off of 42 the last time they played, I believe?
Yeah,
42
against Notre Dame, right?
I mean, this guy's legit. I mean, he's going to be the clear number 1 pick in the draft. I mean, he is kind of the like Adam Zagoria knows, he's the Carmelo Anthony. I mean, he's going to be the freshman guy that's going to lead them the distance if they're going to go the distance. But they got other good players. They got Proctor. They got some other guy what's the other kid's name? It's not Dalton Connect.
Kneppel is also a freshman. Yes.
Yeah. So they got good players, but it'd be interesting to see how this team and a team that I'm going to ask Adam Zagoria about is how about Louisville? How about the resurgence of Louisville? Yep. They've been a dumpster fire the last 2, 3, 4 years. What a job by Pat Kelsey. I think they're 6 or 7-1 in the ACC. What a job by Kelsey getting that program back to respectability.
No doubt. By the way, real quick, in the Big 12, a wild day of action. Number 2, Iowa State. Here we go again with teams that did not survive in conference play on the road. They lost at West Virginia. West Virginia outplayed them with Small, the guard, Javon Small, scoring 27 in that one. Houston came to our part of the world, Jason, and defeated UCF by 1 on a last-second layup. Crazy final couple of minutes of that game. They beat UCF 69-68. Also in the Big 12, Kansas bounced back, beating their rival Kansas State. Earlier today, Texas Tech beat Arizona by 16 today. Arizona had been rocking along. They had been 5-0 in the Big 12. Texas Tech beat them in Lubbock badly today. So, and BYU and Utah are playing late night tonight. So,
you got a little Mountain. You got a little San Diego State UNLV. I think just wrapped up either.
Correct. UNLV upset San Diego State tonight. We're talking Western basketball. That's a great segue to our colleague Matt Zemek, who we love. We were breaking bread with him. I've got the hat on, Matt Zemek, from when we were breaking bread in Phoenix, Arizona at the Final Four, and we saw UConn win it all over Purdue that night. Good to have you back on all subjects. You and Ari Russell have already done a couple of episodes here on the College Basketball Coast to Coast platform, so you're a veteran. It's like Jason and I are the rookies here for this season on a Saturday night. Welcome. Good to have you, my friend. How are things?
So, wild times in the West. You mentioned UNLV going into Viejas and beating San Diego State. And with UNLV just beat Utah State. So, UNLV was just going nowhere. And then all of a sudden, Kevin Kruger beats Utah State, San Diego State. UNLV's now in the conversation in the Mountain West. So, that's a huge plot twist in that particular conference. San Diego State now 6th in the Mountain West standings. That's pretty wild. So that's being turned upside down. And then the breaking story.
Sure, go ahead.
The breaking story right now, as we record right this moment, Gonzaga trails Santa Clara at home by 3 with about 1:30 left. Gonzaga just lost to Oregon State. What's going on in Spokane with the Zags?
Yeah, very true. We were touching on just before you got here. They lost at Oregon State Thursday night. They've taken a couple of other losses as well, and now on the verge of maybe losing at home here to Santa Clara. Santa Clara's had the lead the whole second half, so we'll keep you up to date. Again, we're doing this live on Saturday. You may be hearing it in podcast form after the fact. We're going to stay on for that game to go final, obviously, but if you're hearing us after the fact, you already know results maybe of the late night games that we're kind of talking about on this Saturday night. Again, thank you for finding us however you've done so. Hey, back to the Mountain West. Talk about an anything goes conference right now. New Mexico lost recently at San Jose State. They had been perfect in the conference 6-0 till they lost. They turn around and blast Boise State on Friday night. How up for grabs is the Mountain West, Matt Zemek?
It really is the profile of that drunken barroom brawl, right? That just guys are just throwing these sloppy, wild haymakers, and one night you're decked, the other night you land the punch like that. It really feels like that kind of a conference right now. We saw it earlier in the season too. That Colorado State, would have a big blowout win, and then it would come home to Fort Collins and lost by I think 15, 18 points. To New Mexico. Like, these teams are not consistent. They're all over the place. It's either way up or way down. Like, there's no one that's on a steady pace. I think, the one exception maybe Utah State. Like, New Mexico's leading the conference, but New Mexico got really fortunate. That win over Nevada a few weeks ago, it's the Donovan Dent was on the floor with 2 seconds left. He somehow pushes the ball between the legs of a Nevada defender. Teammate just scoops the ball up. He has to throw it in before the buzzer, and he happens to make it. That was a fortuitous win. New Mexico just lost to San Jose State as well. I think Utah State's actually been the steadier team, even though New Mexico leads that conference. But there really isn't a lot of steady play. It's like one night is its own adventure, and then 3 nights later, it's a completely different set of results.
Love it here from Matt Zemek. Why don't we do this? Because he's got to jump on and get in here while he can. Matt, stand by, because Adam Zagoria of the Zags blog and NJ.com is also going to hang with us. So, Matt, we'll come back to you in a few moments with some thoughts on Purdue winning at Oregon today. Wisconsin won at USC, which you've been writing about. Suddenly, some of the Big Ten traditional teams flex their muscle out west. Matt, I'll come back to you for that, so hang in there in a couple of moments. As we do this live on the fly, Jason Powers, let's welcome in Adam Zagoria, joining us here in the aftermath of a St. John's win. We go all the way from Matt Zemek, who's in Seattle, by the way, in the Pacific Northwest. Let's go all the way east to New Jersey. That's where my man, the purveyor of the Zags blog and NJ.com's Adam Zagoria is back aboard. Now I know it's for real. If I've got you in on the live show, now I know it's for real, my friend. Good to have you here on a Saturday night. And let's start with St. John's, who you watched blitz Seton Hall tonight. How good are they?
Yeah, it was a pretty wild night here, guys. Kadari Richmond, who played for Seton Hall for 3 years and for Syracuse for a year before that, transferred to St. John's. He made his first appearance here tonight back at Seton Hall with St. John's, and it was just a total blowout in favor of the Red Storm. They've won – Rick Pitino's team has won 5 in a row, and they took over sole possession of first place in the Big East tonight. So it was a pretty wild night here. And then there was a lot of talk about NIL money and Seton Hall's lack of it, and how Rick made some fascinating comments that basically if Seton Hall had the equal money to pay Kadari and NIL, that Kadari would have stayed at Seton Hall, or if it was close, he would have stayed at Seton Hall. But obviously, St. John's had deeper pockets.
Also,
no doubt. Go ahead, Jason.
Also, Adam. Yeah, Adam. There was a little double technical tussle there between Holloway and Pitino in that middle of that second half.
What happened, Adam, between the two coaches?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, neither coach really kind of got into the specifics. And I mean, to be honest, guys, that's a kind of a minor storyline to this game.
It's just funny that they both got a little double technical there on a little.
Yeah, there was a double technical, but I mean, the big picture is that St. John's is really good. They've won 5 in a row. They're 7-1 in the Big East. They're on track to make the NCAA tournament main draw for the first time since 2015, I think. And it's early, but they could win the Big East regular season title. Marquette and UConn both lost today, so it's a huge win for them. And obviously UConn losing at home, they had a 28-game home winning streak snapped by Creighton, who's now beaten them 8 out of the last 10, and then Marquette also lost to Xavier, so St. John's is in first place now.
What do we make of that today? I mean, both lost at home, as you said. UConn, Creighton seems to have their number.
What's the formula there?
And then Xavier wins. So what's going on with Creighton and why they've won 8 of the last 10 with Connecticut? Can we put our finger on that? That Connecticut can beat everybody else. They can't beat Creighton.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you remember last year UConn was number 1 in the country, and they went to Omaha, and Creighton beat them pretty bad there last year. Look, Greg McDermott is an excellent coach. Somehow this was only their second true road win of the season, and pretty much it's a quad 1 win. That's pretty much puts them in the NCAA tournament. I'd say they were kind of on the bubble. These other leagues, the Big Ten and the SEC, are going to get 11, 12, 13 teams in. The Big East is really only at about 4 teams now. So that's big win for Creighton. I think just Kalkbrenner's been a monster for them in the middle. Jemiah Neal and Stephen Ashworth played well today. So, Creighton's a good team offensively. And UConn is not the same team without Liam McNeely. And, they're even with him, they're not the same team they've had, the past couple of years.
Voice of Adam Zagoria with us for a few more moments. Adam was in the Prudential Center in Newark for St. John's victory tonight, easily over Seton Hall. Back to Rick Pitino. Just give us an idea. You've been around him now for a couple of seasons. The swagger appears to be there. The belief. The Garden has been rocking. They won a big game with Villanova. Either midweek or last weekend, whichever it was. Covering Pitino, what is all of this like? What do you sense being around him, and how far do you think he can milk this team, this roster that's got some talent? RJ Luis, the guard, etc. What about Pitino and being around it?
Yeah, it's interesting. He agreed to do this Vice Sports documentary. Vice Sports has launched a sports department, and they're doing documentaries on Calipari and Pitino this year. Rick agreed to do that to sort of promote St. John's and get some PR for St. John's. And I think his bigger mission is, he wants to make St. John's relevant again. Obviously, the great Lou Carnesecca just recently died. And, the heyday of St. John's was under Louis, in the 80s. And Rick knows he's never going to be at St. John's as long as Louis and won't have the same impact. But he's obviously a Hall of Fame coach with multiple championships, and he wants to put St. John's back on the map, and that's sort of his overarching goal. He knows it's going to take a lot of money going into their facilities and fixing up Carnesecca and the weight room and all that. But look, this is his second year at the school. He's got a better roster. It's a really defensive-oriented roster. They don't shoot it that great. They don't shoot it from 3. Kadari Richmond doesn't really shoot it. But, RJ Lewis had a big night tonight with 21. Rick said yesterday he's probably going to go pro after this year. They have Zuby Ejiofor, the Kansas transfer, has been playing great for them. So it's a kind of team. It's Rick's kind of team. Really defensive oriented. They get after it. They're intense. And New York City and the St. John's fans have really embraced this team. They had 15,000 at the Garden the other day for Villanova. They had a big crowd for Georgetown. So it's just good for New York City and the Big East and college basketball nationally, I think, when St. John's and Georgetown are good.
Hey, I got to give a shout out.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
I got to give a shout out to my buddy at DePaul. I know the AD over there, Dwayne Peavy, finally break the losing streak in the Big East. Yeah. Hard to believe. 39 games in a row. I mean, me, you, TJ, and two other guys could probably win a Big East game every 40 games. But boy, just talk about, is Holtman? You think Holtman's going to be a good fit there?
I mean, Chris Holtman's an excellent coach. Everybody in the business knows that. I see these people talking about, should DePaul get relegated out of the Big East, and are they going to have relegation? That's never going to happen. They're in Chicago. They're a pretty big market. But, yeah, they hadn't won a Big East regular season game in 2 years. Great. 2 years since 2023. That's a long time. And it'll be interesting now, honestly, at the bottom of the league. I'm not sure how many games, I think DePaul went 0-20 last year, and Georgetown went like 0-19 one year under Patrick Ewing.
Right.
So, right now you've got Butler, Seton Hall, and DePaul all have just one win. And, I mean, I'm not sure if this Seton Hall team is going to get more than 2 or 3 Big East wins, and the same with DePaul. So it's an unforgiving league at the bottom for sure.
Again, at the top of it, right now, Marquette was 13th in the net, but again, Xavier beat them in Milwaukee today. UConn came in 24th in the net, and they lose to Creighton at home. St. John's looking good right now with the win tonight, as you said, atop the conference, and you really wonder with Villanova, with Creighton, can Xavier sneak their way in? Is that a fourth team? Is there maybe a fifth team in this league as we continue to talk about it? All right, you have written a lot about Cooper Flagg while I have you here. He is, as advertised, I like to say, the real deal Holyfield, it looks like to us. 28 more tonight, Adam, from what we've seen to this point. He appears to be one of the premier, if not the premier player that can carry his team in this college basketball season, maybe to a Final Four. Say some more about the Cooper Flagg story, what you know. You've covered him for the whole buildup, and he's delivering now in the ACC and on the big stage.
Yeah, first, I know there were more than 20 NBA scouts at that game in Chestnut Hill tonight, 6 from the Celtics, 2 from the Nets. I mean, obviously, the Celtics are not going to have the number one pick.
Why do the Celtics have to have 6 people there? That's a great question. Maybe they just hanging out. They're local. They're local.
It's local. It's local.
Cooper Flagg. Yeah.
But look, you got to give Cooper Flagg his flowers. This kid has exceeded expectations. He came in with so much hype, and there was some talk early in the year, maybe Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper from Rutgers could challenge him for the number one pick. They're going to be in the top 3 picks of the draft. But let's face it, Cooper Flagg is going to be the number one pick. He solidified himself. The kid was 17 years old, guys, when the season started. Wow. He just turned 18 last month. He helps them win in so many ways, not just scoring. He leads the team in rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and scoring. He's 6'9". He's showing he can shoot it from deep. And, that Duke team, I mean, look, everybody's talking about the SEC getting 12 or 13 teams in the tournament, but Duke might have the most talented roster in the country and the biggest upside. And, I've talked to Dan Hurley about this and other coaches. Like, we can say all we want how great the SEC is and how great the Big Ten is, but in the end, it's going to come down to who wins the championship. And if Duke wins or if somehow UConn wins, then all this talk about how great the SEC and the Big Ten are, it'll be, they will have had a good season, but you got to cut down the nets and add a ring.
Is he a good teammate? All indications are he's been a good culture person there.
Absolutely. He's a great kid. The night he had 42, he gave props to his teammate Isaiah Evans for a big game he had. The other night, Con Knippel was feeling it in the first half with threes. He went for 25. Cooper was getting him involved, facilitating his teammates. So, he's just a great kid. I know the parents. I know the family. The kid just wants to win. That's all he cares about is winning. And whoever gets him number one is going to be getting a franchise-building player. And, you hope he doesn't go to a situation where it's just a terrible team and he has to do everything. You hope there are some veterans around him and some better players around him.
Love that. And again, I was just going to point out in the ACC, it's definitely, Duke is 2 in the net. Louisville, which has been rolling and has won, 8 games in a row, they're 28 in the net. North Carolina lost today, last second shot. Stanford, an all-timer, their first ever game in the conference for however long they stay in the ACC. They won the game with a last second shot at Chapel Hill. Still, North Carolina is 34 in the net going into play today. Clemson, 35 in the net. So, likely the ACC is going to get 3 or 4 teams at least, and Duke appears to be the cream of that. Is there anything else we've left out initially, a storyline or anything else that you're watching, keeping an eye on, Northeast or otherwise, before we let you go? Adam Zagoria here as an insider with us on college basketball coast to coast. Anything else?
No, it's just, I watched some of Alabama, Kentucky today, and
wow.
SEC is just loaded. Nate Oates always has that Alabama team high octane, scoring 100 points. And the SEC is going to get 12 or 13 teams in. It's possible they could get, all 4 teams in the Final Four or 6 of 8 in the 5 of 8 in the Elite 8, something like that. Right. But again, I think it'll come down to I think all those coaches would say it's a failure unless one of them wins a championship. I don't believe an SEC team has won since Kentucky in 2012, I don't think.
Correct.
And, Big Ten hasn't won since 2000 when Bill Clinton was in the White House.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. And again, as much as we say they might get 10, 11, 12 teams, some of them it's going to cannibalize itself down the stretch of the season, and some of them might not even make it out of the first weekend depending on who else is in the way. They can't all make it to the Elite 8 or the Final Four, so it's got to narrow down from there. But you're right. Alabama and Kentucky was wild today. Florida can score. Auburn can score. How good is that Bruce Pearl Auburn team? Quick comment from you. Adam, how good? What do you think?
Yeah, they're great, and they're playing without Janai Broome. That might open up for the pathway for Cooper Flagg to win National Player of the Year because Janai Broome's out for a few weeks.
Right.
It's going to be a 2-man race between those 2 guys for sure. And yeah, we haven't even mentioned teams like Texas A&M and Mississippi State. Any
Crazy.
One of those teams on any given night.
Florida, we're in the Sunshine State. Florida looks outstanding.
Yep.
Wow. Listen, you've done great work. I know it's been a late night and you want to get out of there. They're turning the lights out on you. I see that.
Yeah.
That's our cue. Adam Zagoria, thank you. We still see you. Thank you. We will read you in NJ.com with the recaps and also on the Zags blog.
Yeah, there's also a lot of recruiting stuff from the Hoop Hall Classic in Massachusetts on Zags blog. People should check out.
They can check it all out. This guy's got great insight on all the recruiting stuff as well. We'll talk to you down the road. I know you got to get out of there in the Prudential Center. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, guys. See you.
There goes Adam Zagoria with us. I was done anyway, but they're cutting the lights out on him. Again, if you're on podcast, you're not seeing us. That was the case. Again, follow him at Adam Zagoria, Zagoria. And Jason Powers, follow him at JPO Sports on social media. We'll get back to Matt Zemek in a couple of moments. Just a follow-up on Cooper Flagg and Duke. This is what you need, though, if you're a college basketball fan or if you're interested, if the television executives, everybody associated with the sport, you want Duke. You want the love-hate with Duke, right?
No doubt. And you want the star play, the kind of the Christian Laettner kind of figure there at Duke, the big, the All-American. We know he's going to be top 1 or 2 pick in the draft next later this year. But when Duke's relevant, it keeps the TV audiences engaged. Whether you hate them or you love them, people are watching. So even if it's a game at BC tonight where it's kind of a homecoming for him a little bit, I'm sure they got a good rating there. This guy's a polarizing figure. Shire's done a great job since Coach K left, so give him credit. He's stabilized the ship there. A lot of people weren't sure about Shire, but he can recruit and he's delivering.
No doubt with how they've looked so far.
You worried about Carolina?
They are 34 again in the net, but they have taken some losses. and they get beat today again by Stanford on the last second shot. They have a couple of narrow wins as well. The 4-point play to beat Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago. So
they don't seem like they don't have any there's no I'm scared of that guy at North Carolina kind of guys. I mean, they're deep, good players, but
and now Hubert Davis may be being embattled again, but he coached phenomenally when he was embattled in his first year. Yeah. That ended with a national championship appearance and eliminating Duke in the Final Four. So who knows? Who knows? Long way to go for a couple of months. You know what? I want to go back to Matt Zemek, who patiently waited through all of that. They have not turned the lights off on him in Seattle because it's still dinner time in the Pacific time zone while we do this live on College Basketball Coast to Coast. Good to have you back. Thank you for your patience. And since we have last conversed, it's over in Spokane, not far from where you are. And Santa Clara has beaten Gonzaga. Wow. I again pose it to you, Matt Zemek. What do we make of this for Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference here now with back-to-back losses?
Well, the Oregon State loss, 83 points allowed in regulation, 97 in overtime, so 14 in the 5-minute extra period. And now Gonzaga's allowing 103 to Santa Clara at home.
Wow.
So there's no D. The Gonzaga's defense, you guys, I'm sure, talked about Kentucky. Like Kentucky just keeps giving up big numbers, in the 90s, in the low hundreds. Gonzaga is the Western version of Kentucky. Like there are just major defensive flaws, in a post-Chet Holmgren world. Like there's no eraser in the middle for Gonzaga. The guy who can, switch around and deter everything at the rim. The guys that they have are more stuck in the mud. They're not as quick, versatile, able to rotate as well. So that is when Mark Few goes into the portal this coming off season, he needs that agile street sweeper type big man at the rim who can just deter all sorts of shots and can be rangy and really disruptive. That is exactly what Gonzaga is missing.
They have hang on, Jason. They have EK, but EK is not quite the low post presence that you're talking about. It's interesting though. The expectation is so great that they're going to automatically be in the NCAA tournament. They have the longest streak right now in the country of 26 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances. I believe that is the longest. They're not in danger of missing the tournament, but the WCC has added Oregon State and Washington State just for this year. That conference race with St. Mary's and San Francisco, along with the two new additions, it appears to be wide open to win it, and maybe even the tournament in Las Vegas appears to be wide open to win it. You would agree?
Yeah, it is wide open. I mean, we talked about the Mountain West earlier, that you see these wild, extreme fluctuations. The Oregon State team that beat Gonzaga on Thursday, trailing San Francisco by 8 last time I checked. Maybe the score is a little different a little bit later as people are watching here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. And Santa Clara beat San Francisco by 23 in one meeting this season, but lost in the other. Those two schools have already played there home and home. So wild fluctuations in the WCC as well as in the Mountain West.
San Francisco leading midway through the second half. While we do this live, you may know the result. You obviously will know the result as we become later in the evening or Sunday if you're hearing us on podcast form or watching the replay. San Francisco up by 13 on Oregon State, 55-42. They're a threat as well to maybe win the WCC tournament. Stand by along with St. Mary's. So we'll see. Jason, you wanted to get in here real quick with us on anything else for Matt Zemek, Western or otherwise.
Matt, give me a thought about what's the chatter out west about all the Mick Cronin stuff the last 8-10 days, how that's gone over. Obviously they responded by blasting Iowa, but what's been what's kind of been the after effect of the explosion by the criticism, the public criticism, very public, by Mick Cronin?
I just feel like playing the Masters CBS piano theme, because Mick Cronin throwing his players under the bus, it's a tradition unlike any other. I mean, it is just a rite of winter, right? And so, the thing with UCLA needs an elite bucket getter. Tyler Bilodeau in the post has been good, not great, but good. But when UCLA was really rocking, Jaime Jaquez, that guy was a bucket. You could in crunch time and on an offensive possession, you need 2 points. Jaime Jaquez was that guy. UCLA doesn't really have that kind of guy, and it's certainly not on the wings or on the perimeter. Bilodeau can be that guy in the post. And he can step out and hit a jumper, but you need a guard. You need a guard or a wing who can do that. UCLA doesn't like Sebastian Mack. He's not that guy. Sky Clark, not that guy. Dylan Andrews, not that guy. And so, as we know, Mick Cronin throws all his eggs in that one basket on defense, but the offense has just been a train wreck. And so, okay, you smoked a Fran McCaffrey Iowa team, which is, known for not playing a lick of defense. That doesn't really prove anything. Can UCLA grind it out?
57 points in the first half of the game. I mean, part of me, I didn't see a lot of it. Part of me wonders, was Iowa playing like hockey 5-on-4 here on the penalty kill for the first half at Pauley Pavilion to give up 57 to UCLA?
Iowa gave up 99 to USC. Iowa gave up 116 to Wisconsin. I mean, that team's a sieve. So, can UCLA do this against a good team? Can UCLA do, and there were moments a month ago, like UCLA has wins over Oregon, Gonzaga, and Arizona. And on neutral or road, those are road or neutral wins. So for a while, the Bruins had it going, but then this offense just isn't sustainable. And so UCLA is going to have to find a way to get big buckets against good defenses over the next few weeks, and that's going to be a challenge. It's still an uphill battle for UCLA.
Love the voice of Matt Zemek with us. You're also seeing us on college basketball coast to coast on the platforms, but if you're only hearing us on podcast, find him at Matt Zemek, Zemek. Love his insight as an analyst with us. He's a longtime college basketball national writer and historian. What do you make of the argument that now we're in the throes of the travel and the back and forth to the East and the West, for the Western teams or even the Eastern teams coming West and coming back? For example, UCLA went in December to New York and played North Carolina and blew the lead and lost. They then came back home and played a game or two. Then they went and played Nebraska in a one-off in the middle of the country in the Big Ten schedule. Had to come back home and play one game with Michigan to then go back east. They knew this is what they signed up for with the Big Ten. They then came east and played Maryland and Rutgers and lost both. Now they're back home. Now, they did win the game coming back home, but that is a lot of travel. When you're not an NBA team, a professional team, that's a lot of travel. And this back and forth crisscrossing for the Western Big Ten teams and even for the Western ACC teams, it's got to take its toll, does it not, Matt? What do you think?
You would think, and I think that when we get into February, you're sure to see teams really hit a wall when all of this, accumulates even more. But I have to say, can't we plan in this adjusted era? Nobody was planning for the 12-team playoff era in terms of these conference championship games are obsolete now. We really need to rethink the utility, the importance of these conference championship games. It's similar in college basketball. Shouldn't it be obvious that instead of zip, fly back and forth from 1 week to the next, you should spend 2 weeks, maybe even 3, on one side of the country, UCLA, USC. They shouldn't just play a Maryland Rutgers 2-game stack. You then should be playing Penn State, and you should be playing maybe Ohio State as part of a 4-city pod. And you spend the time over there instead of all the cross country flights, and then you come home and you play 4 or 5 straight home games. So you go on the road for a couple of weeks, you come home for a couple of weeks instead of zip, zip, zip. It's also similar in baseball. Why are teams? I mean, now you have slightly more consolidated schedules, but it used to be you had to fly to a division opponent 3 times in a season. Why wouldn't you just play a 6-game series once, right, in that other location? You're having 4, 5, 6 times the amount of plane flights that you need. And I don't get why the sports aren't adjusting to this, college basketball very much included.
And I thought this when you were saying it, in the NBA and in the NHL, they will go on a West Coast swing where they're there. But again, this is professional sports for 10 days, sometimes playing 5 or 6 teams. It's not quite as conducive. I understand your point with college to play 6 or 7 games in that, but you could certainly play 4 over the course of 9 or 10 days. They stay east, or the
academia, a little bit of class. Don't we have to go to class once in a while?
I don't know. I mean, the virtual world now exists where they're doing everything remotely, and who knows? But I mean, like for example, Purdue, to your point.
Jason, here's the thing: if you're playing a road game at Penn State, you're going to have to take courses, in the Happy Valley motel, regardless.
Right.
You might as well just do it all in one shot, as opposed to, again, the added plane flights get in the way of academia.
That's true. All right, good point. And then the other thing is like Purdue. So Purdue defeats Oregon this afternoon. I want a thought from you on that. But they've now beaten Washington and Seattle. They've beaten Purdue. They've beaten Oregon and Oregon. And then they gotta scramble back. And then I think they come out west again. On
the
another
LA
occasion
circuit, for the LA circuit, probably.
Yeah, later on in the year. To your point about go out there and stay.
You should be doing the whole you should be doing the whole West Coast in one shot. That seems pretty obvious. A
thought on Purdue and how they look today against Oregon and these 2 wins quickly.
Matt Painter had Zach Edey the past 2 years, and the game was a lot easier for Painter to manage when you have a stud like that no one else has, no one has an answer for. I'm so impressed with what he's done coming back this season. He's gotten so much out of that team. He might not go to the Final Four, but really, really good coaching job with what he has. And then, let's also address the Oregon part, since this is Western college basketball. The thing we need to remember about Oregon, if you look at Oregon's games this season, Oregon's always falling behind in the first half, and is often behind or tied with 5 to 8 minutes left. Oregon had to scramble to beat the Portland Pilots, a not very good team, back in November. Oregon had to scramble late to beat Oregon State. Oregon trailed Ohio State by 4 points or thereabouts with 3 minutes left, rallied in the final 3 minutes. Oregon was down 4 or 5 points to Penn State with around 3 minutes left, rallied to win that game. I mean, Oregon's been the best last 3-minute team in college basketball this season. Oregon has scrambled to rescue several different wins. Oregon needs to start getting on top of games. It didn't today, and it finally caught up with the Ducks. Oregon's resume is obviously really, really good, but if you look at the 40-minute games that Oregon plays, Oregon's usually not very good in the first 30 to 35 minutes. So that is something Dana Altman has to fix very quickly.
They're 21 in the net. They've got 8 quad 1 wins so far this year, including an Alabama win on a neutral floor. Fascinating for them. Purdue, by the way, does not come back to the West. USC and UCLA play them separately in West Lafayette later on in the year. But I mean, this cross-country stuff is crazy. I mean, just to reinforce, Stanford and Cal were already in the Eastern time zone playing ACC games. They went back to California, and now in Stanford's case, they're back playing North Carolina today, all the way on the Eastern Seaboard. It's crazy.
And remember, these West Coast teams have to then go back one more time for the conference tournament.
True.
Another one.
In a lot of these cases. And the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. And I don't know where the ACC tournament is.
East Coast somewhere.
I want to say the ACC tournament is in Greensboro again for this year, to have them come all the way east one more time. Hey, Matt, before you get out of here as we rock along, by the way, we're well aware the Washington Commanders, who gut punched my Buccaneers and ended the season and ended the Rives playoff checks, et cetera, as well as the players' playoff checks and everybody else's playoff checks by beating the Bucs last Sunday night, have now beaten the Detroit Lions tonight in Detroit. The banged-up Lions, no match for Jaden Daniels and company, who are in the NFC Championship game. So we're well aware of that one. Matt, did we leave anything else out? I don't want to hamstring you to just the West. Anything else, Big 12 included, anything else that you want to get in on?
I just think that, if Indiana basketball is serious about being a winner, you got to cut the cord. And, okay, nice little win over a mediocre Ohio State team that shouldn't do anything to change the conversation.
The only thing I will say is they played very hard last night when they could have rolled over, and maybe that says something for their locker room, but you're saying long term, it's got to be somebody else at this point besides the older Mike Woodson.
Look, Brad Stevens has been away from the coaching game for a decade. He's been in the executive suite. He's tanned, rested, and ready. you just got to push all your poker chips in the middle of the table.
My man Powers, I don't know if you remember this, Matt, is an Indiana grad school guy. Right. Yeah. You were there in Bloomington. Yeah. You got to be salivating at him mentioning the former Butler star coach, the Boston Celtics star coach, who's now in the front office, Brad Stevens, if that's the name to come coach Indiana, maybe.
They need some star power there for sure. I mean, they had a chance last year for a guy, potentially you could have made a move last year with Dusty May available, who was a former Indiana student manager under Bob Knight and company. So they didn't do that. But you're right. I mean, it's just they got to get Mike Woodson is just stale there in Bloomington. You got to get a younger guy, a guy that, Woodson's done okay recruiting, but they just haven't played consistently, any kind of consistent level over the course of a season.
Especially, that's the voice of Jason Powers, Matt Zemek with me, TJ Rives with you. You're with us on YouTube, on Facebook, on social media tonight. You're also hearing us in podcast form as well. As we rock on a college basketball coast-to-coast Saturday nightcap. They were chanting Fire Woodson at Assembly Hall earlier in the week. I mean, that is almost blasphemy in that building to be chanting that as Illinois blew them out. So this just isn't us manufacturing this. The fan base is over it right now, Matt Zemek. They're over it.
And the other, real quick, Matt, the other part of this is with the success of the football program, it's amped up the pressure on the basketball program now.
Absolutely. And you look at the history of Indiana basketball and the struggles the Hoosiers have had. Kelvin Sampson, a legitimate, real deal, big time coach. He had that phone controversy, which seems so quaint today, relative to everything that's going on in college sports, but that's a big hitter, and unfortunately pushed out for off-court reasons. Tom Crean, he made that Final Four with Marquette under Dwayne Wade, and he in 2013 Indiana was a #1 seed, so he almost got there. At least you had something significant to point to with Crean, but Archie Miller, based on basically one Elite Eight season at Dayton. Indiana's made hires that, coaches that have pretty thin credentials. Go get your home run hitter. Go get your elite coach, not like this test theory, not a guy you hope can become something. Right. No, get someone who's proven it, who's shown it. Like if Brad Stevens says no, make the Kings offer to Billy Donovan, who, how many more mediocre seasons is he going to sit through with the Chicago Bulls? Say, hey, Billy D, come on, you can revive Indiana basketball. We're gonna put color back into your life. Stop living the 40-42 life in Chicago. So get your home run hitter, Indiana. Conduct yourself like a big boy program and put an end to this mediocrity.
All right, and again, the Big 12 is wild with West Virginia beating Iowa State today. Kansas had lost to Iowa State midweek. Kansas got right at home with Kansas State, who's not that good. But, again, this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out conference with Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah and BYU all in the mix, as well as the teams in Texas and in Kansas.
UCF been a pest. UCF
How about, and Houston again, let's say something about Kelvin Sampson's team. They go on the road. They're in trouble. They find a way in the final 3 seconds to diagram a play and get a layup
really good
to
play.
Win. Crazy finish, but that is legit. They've won, 10 in a row, Houston. Look out in the Big 12. It's also very top-heavy and wide open, right, Matt?
It is. I still think that Iowa State's the best team in the conference, but Houston is at the top of the standings right now. Brief word about West Virginia, and beating Iowa State. I think the National Coach of the Year it's a 2-horse race. It's Darian DeVries of West Virginia and Pat Kelsey of Louisville. I think those are the two front runners for National Coach of the Year. I mean, you could throw other names into the hat, but like those are the two guys at the forefront, just because of the enormity of the roster transitions that they've had to negotiate. Like Darian DeVries, he doesn't have his son Tucker available. He's been hurt, and they're still winning. All right. And then with Pat Kelsey in Louisville, don't have Kashawn Pryor, who was obviously a centerpiece player on that team, so vital to what that team does. He's winning without him. So it's DeVries and Kelsey. It's a 2-horse race for National Coach of the Year.
That was a 4th quad 1 win for West Virginia already on this season in DeVries' first season. And again, the Louisville player Pryor was at South Florida last year trying to help them. He got hurt, and they're winning without him. They've won 8 in a row. Some great stories. Listen,
Louisville's going to be the number 2 seed at the ACC tournament, almost certainly.
Crazy.
That's
How
bonkers.
crazy is that?
That's bonkers.
It shows what coaching does in college sports.
Of course.
It shows what coaching matters. Dusty May turned around Michigan. Kelsey, DeVries, coaching matters.
Look at the energy, the enthusiasm, and the success at Kentucky, where they had said it's gone stale. Nobody's listening to Calipari. How much is his heart really in it? How much is it going to ever turn around? Well, Lord, it's turned around in the first couple of months of him not being there. That's for sure. It's a good point you make on coaches. Rick Pitino at St. John's. We can go on and on about these different coaches energizing these programs. Matt, anything else? We got to plug away on the Trojans Wire, the USC coverage. Anything else, or are we good?
How's Juju doing? Give us a Juju update.
Anything else?
Juju goes to Assembly Hall Sunday morning on NBC. So I know you'll be watching that
right?
Game.
National
That's right.
Game for the women for USC and Indiana, I believe, on Sunday.
Absolutely. And just with USC men's basketball, I mean, that's under my umbrella with Western college basketball. USC really needed that Wisconsin win to get into the bubble conversation. So that's a really damaging loss for USC. But, weren't expecting greatness in year 1 under Eric Musselman. It's an all transfer roster. He threw it together entirely in the portal because when Enfield went to SMU, guys, left the USC program. So the expectations were not great, but USC was beginning to pick up some momentum. The win at Illinois, the win against Iowa. If USC had beaten Wisconsin, then you would have begun to have some bubble conversations. So that got squashed, but Wisconsin was terrific. It's not as though it's an embarrassment for USC. It's just, Wisconsin really put it on them. This Wisconsin team scores. We're used to having Wisconsin playing games in the 50s and low 60s. No, this Wisconsin team can score, and that's why the Badgers are going to be dangerous in March.
Love it from Matt Zemek. Have a good rest of your Saturday, my friend. I appreciate you popping on. You and Ari Russell have already done this a couple of times. You'll see those guys coming on the program as well on the platforms of college basketball coast to coast, the YouTube page, through social media, podcast form. Love it.
Being here in Seattle, Matt, have you ever caught a fish at the market? Have you ever caught one of the salmon at the market?
That's a tourist thing, though, right, Matt?
It is a tourist thing, and I grew up in Phoenix, so I never warmed to fish. Give me my Tex-Mex and my.
That's interesting.
Give me my beef burrito.
I was gonna say you're a burrito and fajitas guy.
Yes,
I love it.
Yes, enchiladas too.
Matt Zemek on that. On that note, by the way, they make great enchiladas in San Antonio for the Final Four when it's played coming up there as well. There's a good segue as I have the Final Four hat on again for the TV audience. Hey, thank you for hanging with us tonight on the College Basketball Coast to Coast live Nightcap show as we do it. Thank you, my friend. Great stuff.
My pleasure.
All right. Read him in the USA Today Trojans Wire website. Jason Powers, we got a couple of more minutes here to go over Saturday and look ahead to a couple of things maybe on Sunday. By the way, Arkansas did lose again tonight, losing at Missouri. John Calipari now 0-5 at Arkansas, and you basically almost have to consider this as a lost season for them in the Southeastern Conference. They are looking more and more like they might, dare we say 3-15, something like that?
And how about the credit to Missouri for the turnaround they've had, how bad they were last year with Dennis Gates.
They have gotten it back together, but Calipari spent all this money with NIL and all the fanfare to come over from Kentucky, and it has meant nothing in conference play in a tough conference so far. Hey, say a couple more words about the Florida Gator basketball program, because they won again tonight, late this afternoon, over Texas. And between Walter Clayton, the outstanding scoring guard, as well as Elijah Martin, the Florida Atlantic transfer, and they've got bigs that can handle the ball, shoot it, and defend. I don't know that they are a definite Final Four team, but they have the makings of being a second weekend or Final Four program, don't you think, Florida?
I do. They got a lot of balance. They got a lot of athleticism. They can score. They can shoot the three. They got enough inside play. The one thing I worry about with Florida, and I hate to say this, I don't think we've heard the end of this Todd Golden situation. There was another allegation about an assistant coach that happened in the last couple of days. I have a funny feeling come March, there's going to be a day when something drops about Todd Golden and that program.
All right, so he's under a Title IX investigation with numerous women having come forward and saying that he cyber stalked them online, and even physically, 2 or 3 of them saying that he physically stalked them on campus or around Gainesville. That and we don't know. I mean, that investigation started in September. We're now in January. That hasn't been resolved. And it's the former Gator National Championship player, Torian Green, who's an assistant on this current staff that's under a sexual assault allegation as well. So that cloud hangs over, but the Gators won again today on the court against Texas and have one of the top teams in arguably the toughest conference, the Southeastern Conference.
Yep, and the team they beat today, I'd be looking for a real estate agent if I was Rodney Terry. I got a bad feeling that's going to end ugly. He got that job a couple years ago. Remember, he was the interim when Beard got run out of there. I got a bad feeling this could be the end of the road for Rodney Terry in Austin.
They have struggled, and now how about Oklahoma, after a great start, has lost 5 straight in the Southeastern Conference. They lost again today. In SEC play.
What a win for Auburn, though, at Georgia, who had beaten some teams in that building. They've played pretty well this year. Georgia with Mike White, the former Florida coach. No Janai Broom, Tampa guy, by the way, went to high school here. That's a great win for Bruce Pearl.
All right, by the way, we look ahead to Sunday before we're gone. Here, there is a Big Ten showdown with Illinois and Michigan State right off the bat at noon Eastern time in East Lansing. I believe Michigan State's won 10 games in a row. Illinois again off the blowout win over Indiana. They had lost a couple of games, but they got the blowout of Indiana midweek. They've got Kasparas Yakachonis, who may be a lottery pick, a freshman from Lithuania.
Can you spell us, Mr. Reeves? Spell that for us, please.
Yakachonis is about 6 more consonants than I'm up for on a Saturday night before midnight. But he may be a lottery pick. About 6'7" guard, can handle it, can shoot it. That's going to be a fun game in East Lansing. Also, Michigan and Northwestern playing in the Big Ten tomorrow afternoon. My Memphis Tigers. Woo! What is up with these guys that have the out-of-conference wins? Jason Powers over UConn, over Michigan State, over Clemson, over Ole Miss. But they lose at Temple the other night. Now they stay on the road and play Charlotte at Charlotte. If they're not guarding any better and playing any better on Sunday, what's going on with Penny Hardaway's team, which about this time a year ago fell apart in the American Conference? He's got a whole new NIL bought roster, moved in a bunch of different transfers. Are they going to get it together with Charlotte tomorrow afternoon?
Is this make or break year for him? Is this a make or break year for him?
This is a situation with the games they've won where they should be safely in the tournament. That is, unless they just collapse in the American Conference here. So let's see if they right the ship a little bit tomorrow. Also, Baylor will play TCU in top 25 action tomorrow afternoon in the Big 12 as well. Did we leave anything else out? Any other team? Any other coach, player performance?
Who's the best mid-major team right now that we're not talking about?
You could probably go a couple of different routes. But it might be your UAB Blazers that we need to talk about more. They are explosive. They are now at the top of the American Conference. Maybe we should be talking about them more. In the Mountain West, Patino and New Mexico. We saw them in person.
Yeah, we did.
I know they had a couple of players that are not there anymore. They won 4 games in 4 nights to win the Mountain West tournament. They got that huge win on Friday. Maybe we should be talking about them more as a mid-major power. And again, the WCC appears to be wide open with Santa Clara beating Gonzaga tonight. You've got San Francisco, St. Mary's. I guess Santa Clara's got to be reckoned with, as well as Oregon State and Washington State. Again, Jason, this is the 1 year that they're going to play in the West Coast Conference before they reconstitute the Pac-12. How crazy is that? And they're both in the mix, although Oregon State has lost tonight. Let me confirm that. To San Francisco. They were down 15 or more late in the game. I'll confirm what the final was. Again, the podcast audience knows these results as they're hearing us after the fact. Jason and I are doing this as we speak on Saturday night. So I'm looking as I scroll down. San Francisco leads the game by 18 with about 6 minutes to play. Wazoo, Washington State, has a win over Portland, who's terrible tonight. They're 5-2 in the West Coast Conference. I mean, this conference tournament in Vegas could have 5 teams that you could say that team could win the tournament between St. Mary's and San Francisco, Oregon
Gonzaga.
State, Washington State, and Gonzaga. It's now.
And the other part of this, too, for all the mid-major conferences, there aren't going to be as many spots as there were in previous years with all the SEC teams that are going to get bids, all the Big 12 teams that are going to get bids. That's going to shave the mid-major conferences, the Mountain West, by 1 or 2 spots at least come Selection Sunday. So there may not be 6 Mountain West teams that make the tournament. They'll be lucky to maybe get 3, maybe 4. So like Matt was saying, these rock fights that they're playing and all these up and down teams, you don't want to cannibalize each other too much because then you're gonna bust everybody out by being off the bubble here.
Very true. All right, we covered a bunch on the first Saturday Nightcap. I appreciate you hanging with me. Thank you, Jason Powers. Great stuff.
You got it. Anytime.
We got much more to come on college basketball coast to coast. Make sure you're subscribing on the YouTube page as you watch us. Also to the Twitter handle CBB Coast to Coast with the number 2. CBB Coast to Coast. Thanks to Adam Zagoria of NJ.com and the Zags blog with us, covering the Big East and the Northeast. Thanks to Matt Zemek, kind of our West Coast bureau chief, as I like to say. We'll have a lot of other personalities that'll be on these feeds and on these shows and on the podcast feed, etc.
Hey,
For now, though,
real quick,
I think we're good. What else?
Tell the Prudential Center they're not allowed to turn the lights out when Adam's still talking. They can't turn the lights out on the show, man. Come on.
No, usually the song from the early 80s is The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia. Tonight it's The Night the Lights Went Out in the Prudential Center. But Adam was done, and we were good with him. Jason, great stuff. We appreciate the audience being with us. Again, follow, subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. If you're only watching us, go find the podcast feed and take us with you in your AirPods, your earbuds, your Bluetooth of your car to hear the show and hear the content all the way through March, all the way to the Final Four. We're going to be here. And for Jason Powers, I'm TJ Reeves. Thank you for being with us on College Basketball Coast to Coast and the Saturday live nightcap for this Saturday night in January.